and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing probably one of my most requested book reviews of the year, and that is for Felix Blackwell's Stolen Tongues. Now yes, this novel did come out in 2017, but I opened something from Twisted Retreat that was about this story. It was like a fandom item about this story. I hadn't heard of it, and everybody was like, you need to read Stolen Tongues. So I went to Little Ghost Bookshop in Toronto, which is just this amazing indie horror bookshop in Toronto, Canada, picked up a copy, and I read it. And I read it very, very, very quickly. But I'm going to talk about two things before I dive into this full-length review. First up, during the month of November, I'm going to be posting a bunch of books some on very discounted rates, and then some where I'm just starting to really upload them onto my Pango Books page. The link is down below. It's just where I sell some of my books to try and declutter. But I did recently upload Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay and Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. I will be uploading some more throughout the month. This is just kind of my way of doing kind of like a Black Friday sale on that, and decluttering, because I have quite a lot of books in my apartment, and I have a very small apartment. So if you're interested in those, they're all $9 and under, I think. Some are $5. So if you're interested, they're on my Pango Book page. That's all I'm going to say on that. But the next thing I want to do is, this book was very, very, very requested that I review, and I knew nothing about it, and I knew nothing about the author going into this. Now, about 2 days into reading this novel, I posted about it on my Instagram, and one of my followers DM'd me to bring something to my attention. This doesn't necessarily have to do with this novel at hand, but apparently several days ago, I think a day or two before I actually started reading the novel, Felix Blackwell said something, I believe on Reddit, that a lot of Native American people have been very, very upset about. My follower on Instagram was super, super kind and sent me a lot of info on what is happening, a lot of the things that Felix Blackwell said, and how some Native American people are responding to it. And I just want to let you guys know that that is happening. I am not of Native descent, so I am not really sure how to respond to what is being said. But a lot of Native American people have felt that what he said is very tone deaf and racist, and kind of out of touch with their community. So again, this is something that he has said recently about his upcoming novel, not necessarily the tone that is in this novel. The end of this book actually has a very, very, very nice note from the author all about Native American communities and his choice to feature Native American characters within this book, which again, I thought was very, very nice and brought a lot of attention to things, and he chose to do that instead of kind of a thank you page. He put all of the attention to that. So I'm not sure if his tone has changed since writing that book and writing this upcoming novel, or what's going on with that. I personally could not find the actual original Reddit post, and the only things that I saw were TikToks that had truncated versions of it, of people sharing their opinions on what was going on. So I'm not going to share my own personal opinion because I do not think it is informed enough. But I do want you guys to know that that is happening, that that is out there, and these people's voices, these Native American readers' voices, are very, very, very important, and we should take the time to educate ourselves on this matter before reading this novel. Again, I did not know this going into reading this novel, but I'm going to review it just on the surface level of what is in this book, and not taking, and not about what has been said in 2024, because again, this novel was written in 2017. So that's kind of all I'm going to say on the matter, but I just wanted to make people aware. And I would love to hear, if I have any Native American viewers watching right now, I would love to hear your opinions on the matter. Again, I'm trying to have the most informed opinion that I possibly can, but I just haven't been able to find enough info on it. But I'm still trying to read, and I'm still trying to learn, and I'm still trying to understand. Anyhow, let's chat about this book. So I'm going to read the back of the book really quickly. So it says, a romantic cabin getaway doesn't go exactly as planned. High up on the windswept cliffs of Pale Peak, Faye and Felix celebrate their new engagement. But soon a chorus of ghastly noises erupts from the nearby woods. The screams of animals, the cries of children, and the mad babble of 100 mournful voices. A dark figure looms near the windows in the dead of night, whispering to Faye. As the weather turns deadly, Felix discovers that his terrified fiancée isn't mumbling in her sleep. She's whispering back. Originally a contest-winning story on Reddit.com's horror community No Sleep, Stolen Tongues has received widespread acclaim and is now being adapted into a feature film. I don't know if that's still true. I haven't heard anything about the film. But again, this book was released in 2017. So this novel is scary. This novel is really, really, really scary. I had been told that the first chapter is very, very chilling and very unsettling, and I will completely sit here and agree and say it absolutely is. The tone and pacing of the first half of this book I thought was absolutely phenomenal. I was deeply unsettled. I was reading it home alone. My husband was on a business trip in Seattle, so it was just me and my dog Bartok, and I was reading this late at night, and I was scaring myself crazy. The opening chapter I think is very, very well done. It's very unnerving. It's one of the few books that I've read in the last several years where an opening chapter really sets the tone for what's going to come in the novel and does so in an extremely, extremely unsettling and legitimately scary way. Like, I was definitely scared by the first half of this book, and I was extremely impressed by that. While I think that the first chapter is very, very scary, I think there are scarier scenes throughout the story. I really think a lot of the chapters that kind of end on Faye's revelations of kind of what her dreams have been interacting with and how she thinks that there may or may not be people inside the house or outside of the house or listening to them. I thought those chapters were definitely even more terrifying than the open chapter with Carrot the Parrot, which is just a fantastic name. And I thought there was a lot of very well done descriptive moments describing kind of the uncanny, a lot of the ways that Faye would react in her sleep, and what she would do with her body and how she would contort herself. I found very, 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 very unsettling. And I found a lot of the descriptions of the imposter at the beginning very, very, very unsettling. However, around page like 150, I want to say, this is about a 300-page novel. A lot of what I was scared of and a lot of the atmosphere that this novel had created kind of started to fizzle away. I felt that the book started to really lose steam and slowly become way more repetitive and kind of continued to focus on conventions that worked in the first half of this book but then became played out. There's only so many times you can end a chapter on like a really disturbing revelation that one of the characters has just revealed to somebody else. There's only so many times you can end with the idea of, is there somebody inside the house? And I just felt like that started to really, really get played up a little bit too much. I also felt like as the novel went on, a lot of things kind of just kept happening to like drag the story out. There was multiple people came to visit who might have answers to something, but didn't give all of the answers, didn't know how to give all of the answers, didn't feel the need to share all of the answers, even though they knew what was happening. We have that happen with 5 different characters. 5 different characters talk to Felix and tell them that they have a concept of what might be happening, but don't feel the need to fully explain everything. And it just felt very, very, very repetitive. I felt that I started to find a lot of plot holes within the story as the story went on. I felt like the more we interacted with Felix and Faye, the more I wasn't sure of the true ways Faye was being affected. I felt like it didn't quite make sense in relation to things that had happened in the past. I felt like the power that was controlling what was happening and was basically terrorizing our 2 main characters seemed to interact very differently with a lot of other characters throughout the story. And I'm gonna touch in on that because I think I really need to do spoilers for this novel. And I think one of the things that makes this novel so interesting is, again, how absolutely terrifying the first half is, and then it really just completely loses steam and doesn't really know what to do. It's almost like Felix Blackwell knew that he had written something really, really well and wanted to turn it into a novel, but keeping it as more of a novella, I think, would have been far more powerful. And he just kind of expanded upon the world and the chaos and the plot just to reach that 300-page length. And I honestly don't know how I feel about the ending. To me, the ending of the story felt very much like a non-ending. And I was very confused by it because I didn't know what had happened and I didn't understand why it happened, and it just felt very... I finally reached the point that I'm trying to make, and I'm just going to cut it off because I have concluded the metaphor, but I haven't concluded the story. And a lot of what this story is about is kind of the lengths someone will go to for their loved one. In this case, we have Felix and his fiance, and it's all about the lengths that Felix would go to save and protect his fiance. But at the same time, as you find out later on in the novel, it is also a story about dealing with grief, especially grief that has been deeply, deeply, deeply suppressed. And I think the conclusion of the book is very good at, again, closing up the metaphors of this story, but at the end of the day, this is a horror story, and when you kind of actually overlook the tangible plot and just kind of truncate the story, I feel like you lose a lot of the effects of this story, even though it started out so strong. So I'm gonna dive in so this was a 4-star read for me. And it was a 4-star read for me because I didn't want to put this book down. I was super invested in it, and it legitimately scared me. There were 3 chapters in this book that really deeply unnerved me, had me like worried to go to sleep alone in my apartment, and stuck with me in my head. The visuals and imagery and the what ifs that are happening really stuck with me in my head. And a lot of it is very much gore based. A lot of what's happening is kind of this, again, the unfamiliarity of the uncanny, and then also this concept of, is there somebody in this house with us? And those are the 2 elements that I think Felix Blackwell did a really great job of balancing out and making the book really, really terrifying. And the pacing of the novel I thought was great up until that first half. And then it really just slowly plummets. It does kind of evolve into this kind of chaotic love story between Felix and Faye and the length that they would go for one another. But it loses a lot of the scare factor, even though it still tries to kind of balance the supernatural throughout it. So it stays a 4-star for me because, like The Ritual by Adam Neville, the first half of this novel, just like The Ritual, beautifully atmospheric, extremely terrifying, very unsettling, was super on board trying to figure out what all the supernatural elements are. Afterwards, it just kind of went off the rails, and I didn't enjoy reading the novel anywhere near as much as I did for the first half. It really started to lose its steam, lost the fast-paced nature that really kept me on the edge of my seat, and started to really just play redundant chapters over and over and over again until we got an unsatisfying conclusion. So I'm going to start my spoilers here because I really want to talk about, again, that ending, what our creature was, and just kind of the relationship between Faye and Felix and the lore that was placed in between here. So spoilers are going to start now. You have been warned. But yeah, I was so on board pretty much up until Faye started experiencing more out-of-body... No. I was pretty much on board with this novel until Felix decided to go back to the cabin, and we really introduced T-Way and Nathan as characters. Not that they weren't bad characters whatsoever. I actually found them very, very likable characters. But I think that is where the novel started to lose some of the mystique around what was happening, and a lot of plot holes started to come in. I felt like between T-Way, Nathan, Angela, Lynn, Becca, all of these characters, they all shared an itty bit of information here and there to try and get Felix to understand what was going on. But in reality, the only information that was actually necessary was the information that Lynn had that could have been given to them all along. So we jump through all of these hoops and go through all of these horrible experiences with Felix, and we have the tragic demise of T-Way as well as Nathan, and it's all kind of for nothing. And we watch this monster interact with Nathan and T-Way in ways that he doesn't interact really with Greg, with Faye's dad. And we know that he worked with Greg, that he had some influence over Greg, and we don't know why he didn't choose to attack Greg the way that he attacked T-Way and Nathan. But then we look at, what was it, Tom and Jen, the two original owners of the cabin, and you see that Nathan and Jen actually did have very, very, very similar fates, and they both died off screen, and they both died in really terrible ways, and Jen wasn't discovered for like months, and her new husband was then blamed for her murder. So you have all of these crazy things that are happening there, and then you compare it to Tom, who allegedly just took his own life. And that's kind of up for interpretation, whether he did that or whether he was driven to insanity by this creature. But you're not really sure what this creature's motivations are, and if he's picking and choosing certain people, and if so, why. And if he's only attacking certain people to get something from somebody else. We don't actually have the answers for that. And it just kind of felt like a lot of plot holes were left open, because why at the end then is Faye safe, right? Like, we understand that she is reconciled, that she did lose a younger sibling, that Christopher was a stillborn, and that she suppressed that her entire life, and then she comes to terms and owns it, and she tells the imposter that, and she tells him to go away because she will never fall for his tricks. Like, so why did he go away? Because he didn't seem to leave Tom, he didn't seem to leave Jen, and he attacked T-Way and Nathan solely for interfering. And all he wanted to know was, what makes 5? And Faye tells him. And then he kind of just like grumbles and walks away. I was like, what? Like, I understand it's him dealing, I understand that it's a metaphor for Faye dealing with her grief and her suppression, and it's also a story about how that can really deeply affect a relationship with somebody, and how Felix has to really overcome her own mental trials and tribulations, I think is what I want to say, and her anguish with her insomnia. I understand how it's all about how, like, in relationships you have to build one another up and help people. But from, like, just the story and a plot point of view, that makes no sense. And then, why was Angela there? Angela just kind of felt like this other character added to kind of just, like, casually stroll in, drop some information here and there, and then disappear. Like, I just felt like there was, like, T-Way, Nathan, and Angela could almost have been one character. Because they kind of did so little to push the story forward with what they were adding to the plot. And I really loved T-Way. I thought he was really, really cool. And his death, I think, to me, did make sense. But I don't believe Nathan's did. I felt that Nathan's death was very unnecessary. And it was there just to kind of be shocking and disruptive. And Nathan I found to be a very, like, cool and likable and breath of fresh air character in a way that Ranger Mike sort of was. Like, we have these two kind of lighthearted characters, and then you have, like, T-Way, who is giving kind of more serious concern, where he really does believe what's happening. But at the end of the day, like, Nathan was only, like, what, like 29, you know? I didn't feel that his death was warranted, and they were trying to show the corruption of the cabin on him, but they had that with Jen's storyline. And the fact that Jen and Nathan both had similar fates, I thought was very unsettling, but also very, very, very unnecessary. And we just then have, like, the whole Becca storyline with Caleb. I don't know about you, but, like, if my sister was going through what Faye was going through, and I didn't have any concept of the supernatural, I don't necessarily know if I would bring an infant to visit her. That to me seemed a little strange, especially since Becca knew about the trauma that Faye underwent. And then to still, like, just not tell Felix, and for Lynn and Greg to still just not tell Felix. There was just some weird stuff going on with the family. And then they know all of this stuff is happening. They know that Faye was very triggered by the cabin, and yet Lynn and Greg are like, hey, you guys got engaged. Go spend a weekend in this cabin. Why? That was like the biggest plot hole to me of all with this story. I just don't understand why any of this was set in motion to begin with. And so there was just a lot of like clunkiness towards the second half of this novel. But when we stayed in the first half of the novel, and it was just this connection that Faye had with this imposter that we couldn't understand, we didn't know what he was or why he was, the atmosphere that was created around that was absolutely bone-chilling. And I loved the idea that it was multiple people and multiple spirits and multiple, like, tricksters that the first half of the novel set up, but then we find out it's really only one. But explain the multiple footprints that are running around the house in the first 100 pages when they're staying at the cabin. And I understand, like, yeah, they're mimicking all of the other voices, but to me it felt very, very clear that there were other people. What was the significance of the engagement ring? What was the significance of the dream catcher? Why was it made out of Faye's hair? There were so many unanswered questions that the latter half of the novel could have focused on answering, but instead chose to just completely ignore. And I just didn't understand it, because I think what was so scary about the book was, again, that fear of the unknown. And then some of these creepy elements that don't have root causes are never given answers. Instead, we just kind of forget that they happen. And that's where this novel lost me. I really did enjoy the setting, though. I loved the isolated cabin. I loved that Felix Blackwell made just a random faculty housing neighborhood scary. I think, again, it was a very well-written story. From like a dialogue and an atmosphere and getting inside the minds of our main characters kind of point of view, but I really think it fell off on that second half, and that first half alone could have been more of an open-ended novella with creepy things happening, and I would have been much more satisfied. And I still don't understand the significance of Carrot the Parrot. Is he somehow psychically connected to the imposter? Was the imposter always following Faye, and that's why everything that happened with Carrot the Parrot and them happened? Like, it didn't make sense. That connection was never drawn. It wasn't like Faye was just communing with these spirits her whole life. What about Carrot the Parrot triggered that? I just felt like I was never given that answer. And unfortunately, that kind of negates all of the reasoning behind that opening chapter being so scary, because there's maybe an answer hidden within the book, but it doesn't make sense in the world building and the lore that this book has put for us. So I just found it very, very much of a letdown for one of the strongest starts of a novel that I have read all year. I really, really loved the first half of this book. I thought it was absolutely excellent, and then it just completely derailed into just not knowing what it wanted to be. So yeah. I don't know if I'll read more from Felix Blackwell. I probably would have said yes, just based objectively on this book alone. But it seems like he might not have the friendliest of opinions towards some of the types of people that he writes about, which is a huge, huge, huge bummer. Again, I encourage everybody to educate themselves on the issue beforehand and not just take my word for it. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are way more educated on the matter and come from a background that's going to be more of a valid opinion than just mine. So yeah, definitely take note of that. But overall, this was a 4-star read from me, primarily because the first half of this book was a solid 5 stars, and the second half was this jumbled kind of 3-star mess that still kept me engaged enough to want to read it. But I still just didn't think I understood the supernatural elements of the imposter and how they affected Faye. And it just felt very jumbled and just dependent on the reader accepting what Blackwell said at face value and not really thinking more in depth into what was going on. So 4 stars. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.